My name's Jodie Copley. I'm a Senior Lecturer and Clinical Education Program Director in Occupational Therapy at the University of Queensland, and I'm also a clinical educator in some of our university clinics here. So I have students on placement with me. Reflective practice is something that really comes to life for students when they go on placement. They get content, they hear about it, they work through it, they do activities around that concept at uni, but often I don't think that they really get a handle on what it looks like in the clinical world, in the practice world, until they're on placement, because it's then that they're exposed to their educator doing that almost automatically, routinely, regularly, on a day-to-day or sometimes a moment-by-moment basis. And they will have some words in their head like reflection on action and reflection in action, you know, reflecting in the moment and reflecting after you've seen the client or after you've provided the service. But really they benefit greatly from seeing and connecting how their clinical educator does that. So sometimes I find it really useful to label that for them and to not necessarily use those terms that they might have learnt at uni, but just to make space for it and make it really clear to the student. I think we need to sit down and reflect on that, or let's go back and evaluate what happened here. We would often, as educators, do that as part of the debriefing process. I find that sometimes it's easy in the busyness of day-to-day clinical practice and clinical education to focus your debriefing with students on what's happening with the client or clients, or how they're progressing and so forth, and not always make, you know, really clear space for reflecting on their own behaviour, their own skills, what they're doing. And so I think it's useful to have a structure for doing that, where the student comes to expect that you're always going to talk about that in some part of your supervision sessions or your debriefing or your planning. I will, as the placement progresses, often say to students, and what are you going to focus on for yourself this time? So after a period of time where we've had debriefing, we've talked about what's going well, what do I need to work on more, and you know, having a structure for that is useful early on. 3 things you did well, 3 things you want to work on further, that kind of thing. That helps. As you get to know the student more and they get to know themselves more, putting that reflection into practice is the next step. And so that's where planning, or before involvement with clients, it's useful as an educator to just prompt. And I use words like, what's in the front of your head? You know, what's on the tip of your tongue and what's in the front of your mind about what you want to focus on. Oh, I want to change my language this time, or I want to use more, you know, inviting non-verbals for the clients, or I want to make sure that I move through that interview a little bit more efficiently, or I want to make sure that I, you know, sort of stick to the time frame more. Whatever it might be, I think getting the students to articulate that before they do the next thing makes it a little bit more cyclical. So they're using that reflection. In terms of the actual reflection on their own performance, just to dig into that a little bit more, for some students doing that in a balanced way is difficult. They will sometimes overemphasize the things that they didn't do well, or seem to convey that everything went badly. So that's often a requirement that I have of students, and I'm very clear about. And I say, you need to tell me what went well. They'll start launching into what didn't go well, and I'll often stop them and say, I want to know what went well first. And then that gives me an opportunity to add my observations to that as well, so that, and it's not, sometimes students see it as a self-deprecating sort of thing. They want to be humble, so they don't want to talk about, you know, what they did well. So I think it's, as an educator, it's important to say, no, this is what I'm evaluating you on. You know, balanced self-reflection is a skill. It's a professional skill. I'm not just being complimentary to you. It's something that you need to learn. So being quite serious about that and facilitating it. There's also students who will, particularly early on in the placement, will wait for you as the educator to bestow upon them what you think, how you think they've done. And I think while it's okay, particularly early in the placement, for you to give a little bit more information rather than expect it to all come from the student, because that's how they get a sense of what the expectations are, what you're going to be talking about, what's okay to say and what's not okay. You know, you're modelling that for them. I think very quickly you need to, right from the beginning, be asking them, what do you think? How did it go? How did it feel to you? You know, how did you feel while you were doing that? And then often you can draw that contrast with them when they say, oh, I felt like it was just coming out as gobbledygook. And you can say, well, it didn't sound like that. There are a couple of times you stumbled, but really what you said about this was really quite clear. So you can, you know, help them to see the balance in their own performance as well.